As you recall from the first two videos of Prayer of the Heart, in the first video we talked a little bit about Teresa of Avila, Doctor of the Church, who gave us wonderful writings about prayer from her own experiences. And in the second video we talked about how to do this Prayer of the Heart. And now we're going to focus in on these chapters in Way of Perfection. We're going to start with chapters 28, then 29, which talk about Prayer of Recollection. And then we're going to go on to chapters 30 and 31, which talk about Prayer of the Quiet. Now you can think that these are all different types of prayer and that Prayer of the Heart is something different. But actually, Prayer of Recollection and Prayer of the Quiet are two sides of the same coin. That is Prayer of the Heart. So this is all Prayer of the Heart. And the Prayer of Recollection is the first part, and the Prayer of the Quiet is the second part. So we're dealing right now with this first part, Prayer of Recollection, in chapter 28. When we delve into Teresa's writings, we find that they're rich with multiple images. And she uses images from her time. And there's two particular things that she focuses on in this chapter that may seem very different, but they both are different expressions of God. First part, she talks about kings and castles and king in his palace. She uses all this royal imagery, which was part of her day, part of her time. And she also, and so she uses that to refer to God. And probably because of his awesomeness, his great wonder, his magnificence. And then she also refers to God as her spouse in very intimate terms. So there's this intimacy, but there's also this great awesomeness of God. And those two things are mixed in this chapter. So let's begin, and in the beginning of this chapter, she refers to St. Augustine. And she says, Augustine was looking for God and discovered that God is near us. He's not beyond our reach, that he's within us. And she's quoting Augustine here, and she's recommending this for us, that we find God within us. We don't have to go far away to find him. And she will also say, you don't have to go to heaven to find him. And as you may recall, this book, Way of Perfection, was written especially for her sisters to give them instructions on how to pray. So she's addressing this to them. And she says to them, when you approach God, you have to avoid being bashful, avoid being like with a false sense of humility. And the image she uses is that of an emperor. She goes, imagine the emperor of heaven and earth coming to you. He wants to do a favor for you and delight in your company. She said, would you ignore him and until he went away? Is that what you would do? Of course not. You would give him your attention, because that's a false sense of humility, that we'd be so bashful, we'd be so humble, we would not approach God. No. In humility, in the humility of a child, we must acknowledge God. We must pay attention to him and listen to him, respond to him, and be open to him. And Teresa would tell us, as she does in this chapter, ask him to let you speak to him as he is your spouse, to treat you as his brides. Remember how important it is for you to have understood this truth, that the Lord is within us and that we should be there with him, as we would for any spouse. Then she moves on and refers to a castle. Okay, she says, one who is experiencing prayer of the heart is like a person in a strong castle, and it doesn't worry about enemies. Who is she talking about? Who are these enemies? Okay, they're the things of the world. They're not only distractions in our prayer time, but they're the distractions in our life that enter into our prayer time. Okay, she says we must withdraw from these things, and also when these distractions come in, when we're tempted by them, we need to offer them to God. She said the body too, when we pray, is going to distract us. It's going to insist on its rights. Okay, and she said the soul must master this, and it will be at the expense of the body. Then she goes on to talk about a palace with a king. Okay, she says, imagine this palace, the palace within us, the palace where God dwells. Imagine this palace of gold and precious stones fit for a king. And she likens these precious stones as virtues. She said, the greater they are, the more they shine. And the king is there. He dwells there. Where else does the king dwell? In Mary's womb, a precious palace for her king, who is our king. And she says, you are that palace. This great king dwells in this little palace of the soul, she calls it. And she said, this great king really dwells within this little palace of my soul. I should not have left him alone so often, but should have stayed with him and never allowed his dwelling place to get so dirty. What is she talking about? You know, we do this. God's dwelling place is within. We allow it to get dirty. We allow it to get dusty. We say, oh, you know what, God? You know what? When I have more free time, after I'm finished this project, I'm gonna pray some more. Or, when I go on vacation, then we'll have some quality time. Okay, we keep putting off prayer. Okay, and we let the palace get dirty. And she said, I should not have left him alone so often. He's pleased to dwell in us. And she says he's like a father seated on the throne of the king, seated on his throne, which is our hearts. And then she talks about our freedom, and it's our freedom that makes it a great place. She said, in our freedom, we must offer ourselves totally. And she mentions in this chapter, in her words, he takes what we give him, but he does not give himself wholly until he sees that we are giving ourselves wholly to him. So in other words, if we offer ourselves, wholly, it may not be perfectly, but we offer what we have. It may be just a small little place. And he will take it and he will fill himself according to our measure. So if we give him ourselves and it's a small bowl, he'll fill it. But he'll also transform us from within and work to enlarge that, because he knows he wants to put more in it. So he has in mind what he's going to put in, so he enlarges us. It's never against our freedom. He never acts against our freedom. Okay? But will work inside us. So she also says we've got to cooperate and empty it of all the junk, and she says, and all the vulgar people. And we know what that junk is in our life. And that's what we have to work on eliminating from our lives. The last thing she says, and this is encouraging for us, she said that God doesn't come alone. She said the king doesn't come abandoned by his courtiers. No, he comes with the whole throng. Who are these courtiers? They're the angels, the saints. They're the people who have gone before us, who have died, who join us when we pray. All of heaven and earth join us. We specifically mention this at Mass. And that part of the Mass is like when we enter into prayer of the heart, when God offers himself to us and we offer ourselves to God. Okay? But we say we lift up our hearts, and at that point we are joined with heaven and all the people who have died, all those who have gone to God or are on their way, and we join with them in our prayer. We pray together, this little palace of the soul.